Davis on the show. Hey, we have a special show. We got Eddie Davis on the show. How's it going, Eddie?
Hello, I can hear you. It is going.
That's good. That's good. Uh, yeah.
I love this picture of me. That's exactly what I look like.
Yeah, I
This is
tried
a
to put a little Picasso into it, but get a good representation.
it's good. It's like a live stream of me just talking into this microphone right now. It's kind of hypnotic. I'm gonna have to look away, I think, if I want to have a conversation with you.
Cool, cool. All right.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm happy you agreed to do this crazy thing. It's crazy. Whoa. Hey, let's start at the beginning. Uh, how was birth for you?
Birth is was unmemorable, I think, because I don't remember it, so probably nothing much of significance. And I haven't even really heard many stories about it. I think it's probably nothing worth talking about.
Yeah, yeah, same here actually. I feel you.
I have some
So,
friends who get like every year on their birthday, they get the story of being rushed to the hospital and how they were born. I feel like pretty lucky that I've avoided that kind of graphic detail in my life.
yeah, yeah,
We
it's a little gross.
we could jump ahead a few years in the bio if you want.
Yeah, let's jump ahead. Well, actually, wait. Let's take a step back. So let's let the people know who you are. So I I would say you're a composer. And this is me. Let me know if I'm wrong. A composer,
I'm gonna
field
not
recordist.
fact check you.
Yeah, yeah. Professor, music professor. Um, anything else?
That's
Fact
great.
check me.
I just scrolled down and I'm looking at you got the bio here in the YouTube live stream, and it says I'm a composer and field recordist and professor at the University of New Haven. Those are my three identities. Yeah, you got it right. I do all those things. Field recording and composition for me are very overlapping. I don't think of myself as being a field recordist separately from being a composer. That's kind of one job for me. Professor is a separate job. I will confess to that. But I do teach classes about making music and a little bit about field recording and integrating those things together. So it's kind of one big stew that all those things feed each other.
Yeah, yeah. I think my senior year, I think I was in one of your first classes at the college. I think the musicianship class.
That is true. That was one of the classes that I taught was musicianship. I still do that once in a while. That's mostly just a class about getting people to learn how to listen to stuff. That's kind of I think of my maybe if there's an overlap between my composer identity and my professor identity, it's that I like to get people to listen to stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely get that. And then uh sticking with the college theme here, I took your sonic ecology class. Honestly one of my favorite classes at the school.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, that was a fun class to teach. In that class, we dealt with a lot of the overlap between the sounds of the world and the sounds that musicians make, and the kind of intersection between those things. So, musicians who use the sounds of the world as musical material, people who write music that is meant to be performed outside. So, we ended our semester with an outdoor performance. Everyone wrote pieces to happen outside. And I see that trombone behind you looks somewhat familiar.
Yes.
That's a good tool for outdoor performance if you feel like um, waking up everyone who's sleeping in a residential building on campus. I highly recommend bringing a trombone to an outdoor performance. It's a good thing to do.
Yes. I think that's my most favorite performance I've ever been a part of, I think.
Did someone interrupt your performance by requesting Wonderwall?
Yep.
That's my memory of that. Just a random person saying, "Play Wonderwall."
Yeah, that was fun.
and you chose not to interrupt your performance and go straight into.
Yeah.
So you
I wish
decided
I
to just
knew that. I wish I knew that
press
song.
on.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
John, you're in my musicianship class. You can't ear train your way through that two note. Do, 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 do.
Wow, it is two notes, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah. Today is gonna be the day. It's mostly two notes, yeah. We'll work on that. We'll do a separate Wonderwall lesson another time. Save that for a different podcast.
Yeah, yeah. So okay. So what I know, here's what I know. Uh you are professor at the college I went to. Let's go back in time, but after birth. What's your first memory of music?
My first musical memory was that there used to be this, well, I'll give you a lot of historical context because we got to go back into history. There used to be these things called cassettes. I think they're making a comeback now for some reason, but people are releasing music on cassette. But back when I was a kid, that was the way we listened to music. And I had a little mini cassette recorder that my parents bought for me. And I joined this, they used to have these things that were like a record club where you could send away and you get like 6 tapes for 1 penny. And I got 6 tapes for 1 penny. And I had a little cassette recorder that I carried around with me everywhere. And I just liked to listen to music all the time. That's my earliest musical memory, is joining the cassette club and just basically annoying the shit out of everyone by playing music with me wherever I was.
What kind of music did you have?
The one that I remember, I had this little box that like stored the cassettes in it. The one that I remember was the first one that I got was Aretha Franklin. The song is called Who's Zoomin' Who? And now I'm going to open a search window and find out when Aretha Franklin Who's Zoomin' Who came out, because then you'll know exactly my exact date of birth.
Okay.
That came out in July 1985. So I assure you that I was 5 years old and that I was playing Who's Zoomin' Who for everyone in the summer of '85. That was my jam at 5 years old.
That's cool.
And shortly after that, I got, well, we don't have to dwell on my childhood years for too many hours here because I don't want to be that guy who tells hours worth of childhood stories. But the fundamental change that happened next was my parents bought me a keyboard, a Casio keyboard. The model is SK1. Your listeners out there can Google a Casio SK1. It was one of the first sampling keyboards. So you hold down a thing and you could say a word into it, and then you could play it like a little melody. It was pretty fun to burp into, and then you could like play a melody of your burps, or you could make a dog bark into it, and then you could play a melody of dog barks. And I don't want to say that was my first sonic ecology lesson, but I can tell you that that was certainly my first creative sound making, opening up the possibility of using real sounds. Oh, and the sampling length was a less than a second. We could fact check that, but
Oh, wow.
it was a real short sample, so you couldn't like tell a story or anything. You could just go like and it would take that much, and then you could go Anyway, so I wrote my first compositions were of weird sampled things.
That's awesome. And I guess that's carried through in a sense. Just
I mean, it's
with
33 years later, and I'm still doing the same exact thing. So, yeah, it hasn't changed. Have you ever watched The Cosby Show with Stevie Wonder on it? I'm going to put in a plug for that.
No, I don't think so.
The Cosby Show with Stevie Wonder has like all the Cosby family gets to meet the real Stevie Wonder. He's playing himself, and he's in the studio. I don't know what year this was, but he has like a sampling keyboard. It's the same thing as the story I just told. And he like samples Rudy's voice and he puts it into a song. And anyway, that's legendary.
Awesome.
That's a legendary early '80s sonic ecology moment. I'll have to bring that into class next time I teach sonic ecology.
You got it.
It's the same thing as the Casio SK1. Anyway, it was all downhill from there, from age 6.
That was only at 6. Oh my god. You had such a short, happy time.
Those first, and I don't even really remember them, to be honest. My memories start with the Casio SK1 and Aretha Franklin, Who's Zoomin' Who. So,
well, that's better than Michael W. Smith. I think that's what I had. But
that was your first cassette.
Yeah, Michael W. Smith, and then Puddle of Mud.
Oh yeah. How many D's are there in Puddle of Mud? It's
Are there
at
more
least
than
minimum of two.
minimum of two? Yeah.
I think it should be Mud with like seven D's at the end of it.
Yeah, that would reflect the music better, probably.
So this is going to be about our age difference, but what format did you have Puddle of Mud in? Was it a CD? Was it a an MP3?
That
What are
was
you listening
it
to?
was a cassette actually for like it was my older brother's cassette. That's why I sort of was playing around with it. And then I got in trouble for listening to Puddle of Mud at such a young age.
Is there some objectionable content? I will confess I don't have the Puddle of Mud back catalog memorized, but there's some objectionable content in there.
I don't think so. I think it just sounded like devil music. I think that's what my parents thought.
Okay, and Michael Smith did not sound like devil music.
No.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Let's move on. Okay,
Okay.
so after the golden age, the young childhood golden age, where do we go now?
Let's jump forward to like high school, high school Eddie. I learned how to play guitar and I joined a bunch of different bands. And I was mostly into like alternative. This was kind of the grunge era. Are you giving some musical accompaniment to this story?
Yeah, I'm trying to
I
make
can
it
see your hands, but
nostalgic.
I can't hear. Is it like a kind of sentimental? Can you
Actually,
can you
it's sort of
integrate some themes from like Smells Like Teen Spirit into it? Get some Smells Like Teen Spirit in your left hand and some like nostalgia in your right hand. And that would be the
okay.
perfect, because we're talking about, 92, 93. This is like, you know, prime Nirvana time period. And
Mhm.
uh, I just wanted to be in a grunge band.
Yeah, yeah.
So I started a bunch of them with various people in high school. I was also very into Nine Inch Nails, so I started a sort of industrial band, if you could call it that. That maybe gives us too much. A sort of a two guys yelling over a drum machine and distorted guitars and distorted voices.
That's awesome.
That was that band. And I don't know, we had like uh we made tapes that we sold. I made a 7-inch vinyl back before that was like a real thing. I have some my 7 inches of my bands. Uh,
Oh, how'd you do that?
how do you make a 7 inch? You just got to send it to the man with the 7 inch factory.
Oh,
You send your tapes over there, and they put it on a record. It's super expensive and real stupid. I mean, that's why like my in my parents' basement, there's still a box of them of unsold 7 inches from 25 years ago.
damn.
That
What was your name?
the band name.
Yeah,
The two bands I was in for the longest, one was called Carbuncle. That was
cool.
a sort of a grungy band, and then my industrial band was called Metempsychosis, which is the
Nice.
word. It sounded awesome at the time. It means the transmigration of souls. But the problem is everyone kept calling us Madam Psychosis, like it was the name of a fortune teller or something like that.
Hmm.
Madam Psychosis is way less badass than Metempsychosis, so we were stuck with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got like a split 7 inch Carbuncle Metempsychosis. We got Carbuncle on side A, Metempsychosis on side B. Those are not appreciating in value right now in my parents' basement. Those went from being able to be sold for $5 to being now probably less than 50 cents each.
Yeah. Well,
They
wait 10 to 20 years. It could go up. It could
could,
go up.
I'm holding on to them for a big investment in once the music of Metempsychosis comes back. I should have sent you some horrible Metempsychosis tracks for you to play on your podcast, but no, let's not torture your listeners with that. Uh, Also, in around the same time, I wanted to take music classes in high school.
Hmm.
And in high school, you can play in the band, or you can play in the orchestra, or you can sing in the chorus. But there's no like class for someone who wants to be in an industrial band and a grunge band. Like there's no outlet for that in a high school music curriculum.
Hmm.
So they had a music theory class that I took, and that class definitely changed my world. That class had some composition assignments in it, and I was like, oh, you can actually write down notes for other people, and they will do the things that you tell them. It's way more fun than trying to be in a band. I don't know. Trying to get your bandmates to do what you want them to do is much harder than if you just call yourself a composer and write the notes down, and then people read those notes.
Yeah.
So I the music theory class then led to me getting like independent study in my high school, which led to me. I wrote a piece for like the high school wind ensemble, and basically started calling myself a composer, maybe like age 17.
What did your okay? How would you describe your first pieces when you sort of took that step?
Crappy. I mean, everyone starts from like sort of imitating other people when you're
Mhm.
that age, especially. You know, when I was in a rock band, I wanted to be Kurt Cobain, so I just wrote songs that sounded like Nirvana songs, poor imitations of Nirvana songs.
Mhm.
When I started being a composer, I was interested in like late romantic and early 20th century music. So I don't know if your listeners are familiar with people like Debussy and Ravel and Arnold Schoenberg and Anton Webern. These are composers, European composers from the early 20th century. And I don't know, that music sounded amazing to me. Bella Bartok, I really liked when I was in high school. So I wrote like Bartok imitations. I don't know. I think everyone starts there. So I won't be too hard on myself by saying it's crappy, but
Mhm.
everyone starts by imitating your heroes in some kind of,
Yeah.
and then, you know, like the more you're exposed to, which also means the older you get, the more experience you have, the more things you listen to, the more people tend to either find their own voice or get comfortable always being an imitator or stop being creative for whatever reason. So for me, it was kind of a gradual process of finding the stuff that sounded like me, whatever that means.
Mhm.
It's an ongoing process, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I I'd love to hear your thoughts on even taking a step away from the historical aspect, but
Sure, yeah,
um
we don't have to go year by year chronology through my life.
but for the what you say the sort of imitation of when you first started composing to where you are now, what could you sort of frame that in a way and that like progression from like then to now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I'm probably still imitating the people that I like, but just what I liked has changed.
Mhm.
Maybe if I could summarize it, and maybe it comes down to I had a teacher once who was very influential who told me, you know, you as a composer you need to write, or as a musician of any kind, you write what music you want to bring into the world, which is a way of saying what the world needs more of. So anything you write is a sort of a statement about what the world needs more of. And maybe for me, in my own story, like I saw that there were a lot of Debussy and Schoenberg imitators already, and maybe the world had enough of that music. And so I didn't need to add to the pile of music that sounded like that. But I found where the pile is that I think there aren't enough things in. Am I describing that in a way that makes sense?
Yes,
There,
yes.
the, and so it became a choice just as I matured and as I kind of found my own voice. It's sort of like, where do you think there needs to be more of this kind of music, whatever that is for you? And I think maybe that's a natural process for everyone. You move from the imitation to like the establishing yourself as being a creator of something that there is not enough of.
So what isn't there enough of for you?
For me, well, we already talked about sonic ecology.
Mhm.
I got very interested in the idea that there is not enough music that acknowledges the sound of the world. There's a lot of music that's about musical instruments and what sounds you can make with them. There's a lot of music that's about the 12 notes of an equal tempered scale and what you can do with those in various combinations. And I don't know, there's a lot of music already that's about romance and love and relationships and personal struggles and, you know, victory over adversity. And there's a lot of music that's about storytelling. I'm giving a long list of all the things that I don't do. I don't. I don't have a problem with storytelling music or storytelling songs, but there's a lot of them that I love to listen to, and I don't feel like I need. My contribution isn't to add to the pile of those things.
Mhm.
Maybe someday I will have like a really novel idea about love that no one has ever had, and I'll feel like I need to express that in music. But for the moment, I think that there's enough of those things that other people are holding that down. So the things that are about the sounds of the world, I think there's not enough attention to, not enough music that's about, and it's just a very, I don't know if I can use a mining metaphor, as a very rich vein of ore to be mined, of music that is about the world in that way.
So, so does it change piece to piece? Do you, when you start a piece, do you sort of, is there like a specific part of the world you're trying to represent? It probably changes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely changes for every piece, both the thing that I'm trying to represent or think about, and then also what my approach is. A lot of pieces are inspired by listening in some way. So I'll hear something in the world and I'll think, how might I incorporate that sound or that relationship or that concept in some way into a piece? But yeah, it's different for everything that I do.
So, with that being said, maybe we can play a short snippet of a piece. Um, so let's play your piece in still. Do you want to give some context before?
Sure, you want to listen to Instill? This is a piece that I wrote last year for an amazing flute player named Philip Snyder. He just finished his grad work at the University of South Carolina and recently relocated to New York City. He asked me for a piece. I'll give you a little background on him. He is an amazing flute player. He works a lot with electronic sounds and composes his own music for flute. He plays in a flute duo. He is also on the side interested in labyrinths. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the idea of labyrinth, not in the David Bowie sense, not in the sense of a maze that you get lost in,
Mm-hmm.
but a labyrinth that's a sort of a meditative walking labyrinth. This has gotten to be, maybe it's been around for many, many years, maybe hundreds of years actually, but it's a sort of a recent trend. People are installing these sort of labyrinth footpaths, and you can walk it in a sort of meditative way. I heard someone once say about him, it's not a maze for you to get lost in, it's a maze for you to find yourself in. So it has a single path that you walk. This is a long way of saying Philip has been interested in these for a long time. He's designed and built them himself, these labyrinths. And he asked me to write a piece about the labyrinth or for the labyrinth. His original pitch to me was, he is a flutist. He wants to walk through the labyrinth while playing, and maybe the audience can be seated around the labyrinth. And you were asking me about, where how inspiration strikes or whatever. And this was a place where inspiration was, how can I flip the sort of traditional model of audience and performer? So rather than everyone sitting around a labyrinth and watching a flutist work his way through the labyrinth by himself, I said, I'll only do this if you let the audience walk the labyrinth and the flute is outside. So kind of flipping the who's performing and who's listening. Anyhow, so these labyrinths are on the ground. They're in outdoor locations. So this is a piece meant to be performed outdoors. The flute player plays a series of little repeated melodic patterns, and audience members take turns walking through the labyrinth, either by themselves or in small groups. Every person who walks through the labyrinth gets a little jar of seeds. And as they walk through the labyrinth, they can shake the jar of seeds at certain points, take a seed out of the jar and drop it onto the ground, and also kind of sing along or hum along with the sounds that the flute is making. So it's a sort of participatory, meditative experience. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Something. Tell me that description made sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it.
Okay. So if you want to play a little bit of it, this is just an excerpt of the whole. I should say that the whole performance lasts 3 to 4 hours. And so the flute player plays continuously for 3 to 4 hours. It's a kind of endurance piece for him. And audience members take turns walking through. It probably takes 10 minutes if you walk slow to walk through the labyrinth. So people would come and go. It's almost like an installation that, people can move through at their own pace. No one stays for the 3 hours, except for the poor flutist who has to sit in the sun for the whole time.
Yeah.
So if you want to play an excerpt, you'll hear the flute playing in the background. The loudest thing on this recording is the sound of the space. We did it in North Carolina. In late summer, there's lots of insects outside, so it almost sounds like a field recording of a field full of insects. It's what you're hearing is that's what the piece sounded like.
All right, cool. I'll play it. Here is Instill. Oh, not yet. Now
Patience.
it's Instill. Very cool. Sorry, there's a delay on my voice now, so when I talk, it sounds weird. Anyway, so
Okay.
my question sort of went with the flute. How is it? Is it written down, or is it reflective of like the birds singing of the nature's sounds?
It is written down. It happened to be that we played it in a place where it, nicely lined up with the sounds that were there. I don't know if you could hear. It was pretty subtle. You could hear it, people's footsteps and the kind of shaking of the jar of seeds. The jar of seeds shaking sound is a very high, noisy sound, which kind of was overlapping with the insect sounds and the flute was kind of in the same register a little bit as the bird. To answer your question, is it was written down for sure. It's a 1 page score that is
Mm-hmm.
divided into one, two, or three note gestures. And I think that you get to the bottom of 1 page and there's a repeat sign and you go back to the top. But it takes maybe 15 minutes to play through the page. So over the course of a multi-hour piece, there is some repetition to it. One thing that's really important to me in writing a piece like this is the pauses that happen between the flute gestures. So it becomes almost based on the pacing of the flute part, becomes like this conversation or dialogue with your ear picks up on as soon as the flute plays, you're listening to music. And then the flute stops, and what are you listening to? You're hearing the sounds that are happening in that place. And maybe they start to suggest a kind of music of their own. I think if the flute was playing the whole time, you'd miss out on that effect of constantly refocusing on, I don't know, a musical sound and a less musical sound or a non-musical sound,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. So the idea of spaces or silence becomes really important in music like this to me.
Yeah, it's sort of it changes the perspective of it all.
Yeah. you're listening. You're shifting your perspective constantly as you're listening.
Yeah. Oh, I was listening. Here, let's go to another track. I was listening to, is Slant Light Volume the guitar piece, the duet guitar piece?
Yes, although if I can, while we're on the subject of holes and silences, can we do cuts and equivalents first?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Just, if we're trying to keep our a nice segue, I just talked about the importance of having the spaces. Cuts and equivalents is a piece for two trombones and two clarinets, and also the sound of a field recording that I made of traffic going by on an overpass. Then the traffic sound has been kind of stretched out and processed, so it might not immediately sound like traffic, or it kind of gradually sounds less and less like traffic, depending on how much of this we listen to. But there are, between whenever the instruments never play at the same time as the traffic. They're always like a hard cut. Like if you're thinking about film editing, it's like a smash cut. One of them stops and the other one starts right away. And there's also a lot of pauses or spaces. Just like I was mentioning with the last piece, although this is not for outdoor performance, but the silences in between become really important. The title for this one, Cuts and Equivalents, is a reference to the visual artist Carl Andre. He's still alive, I think, but he's a minimalist sculptor, maybe from the 1960s and 70s. He had a lot of repetitive, minimal kinds of constructions. He has a series that's called Cuts, and he has another series that's called Equivalents. And he also has a phrase that I love that's very relevant to this piece. And the phrase is, "A thing is a whole in a thing it is not." I'll say it again because it's so good. A thing is a whole in a thing it is not. So anything that you insert into something where it's made of a different material becomes a kind of whole. For him, that would be like inserting a piece of zinc into a piece of iron or something like that, and then the zinc becomes a whole. But I thought about that musically, that there's two kinds of holes in this piece. There's the holes of the traffic sounds, and there's the holes of silences. Okay,
Wow.
that was my intro. You can play it.
I love that. I love the especially the key sounds,
Yeah,
the pads. I love that.
it's beautifully recorded. Yeah. So maybe you could hear the holes that are happening in that. The other idea for that piece, and it's relevant to a lot of my music, is the idea of same but different. So every time that the clarinets and trombones came back, maybe you could hear they almost play the same melody, but it's just like slightly different. if you're half listening to it, it sounds like they're just playing the same thing over. But if you really give it your attention, you can hear that there's subtle differences and changes. And I like music that's about subtle changes and repetition and this sort of conflict between those. I don't love music that's just straight repetition, but if there's some subtle tweak, I can stay interested for a very long time.
Cool. Very cool. Hey, let's
Hey,
take a step back. Let's take
yeah,
a step back here. Um okay, where did we end off historically? High school?
yeah,
Where'd you go to college?
we're back to my superhero origin story. I went to college at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and I studied music composition right from the beginning. So I mentioned this theory class that I had in high school, and I started thinking of myself as a composer. And then right away, I just went to college and started. I just stuck to that identity and started as a college freshman being a composer.
That's awesome.
Uh, it was a fantastic experience. Northwestern has a really good music school, so they attracted um, the really best performers to that program, and I was lucky enough to work with fantastic performers. To any aspiring musicians or songwriters or composers out there, collaboration is an extremely important part of the job. It's a mandatory part of the job. There's not a lot of, I don't know a lot of successful musicians who just work entirely by themselves in their bedrooms. You have to engage with other musicians out there. So I was really lucky at Northwestern to have people whose playing I really loved ask me to write pieces for them. I got to work with a lot of faculty members who were doing interesting stuff. So yeah, that was a good decision for me, a formative time. And actually, one of uh, my teacher there, who became kind of my composition mentor, he ended up leaving Northwestern the same time as I graduated, and he got a job at Brooklyn College. So I followed him there. Next chapter of my story is I moved to Brooklyn, New York, and I got my master's degree from Brooklyn College, studying with my same teacher from Northwestern. Amnon Woolman is his name. I'm happy to put a plug in. Amnon is still a very dear friend and a fantastic composer, amazing teacher. Many of the ideas that I still think about every time I sit down to write are things that Amnon said to me 30 years ago. No, 25 years ago.
That's crazy how that happens.
Yeah, that's part of why what's important to me today about being a teacher is thinking about the impact that teachers that I've had have made on me, and naively maybe thinking that maybe I'll say something that someone's thinking about in 20 years, or that I'll have an impact on the way that someone thinks about their own creativity or music making, something like that. So yeah, inspiration to me, not just as a composer, but as an educator as well. All right, now it's getting kind of sappy. We need to come back from the brink of sappiness
Oh,
here.
right. Here I can help out.
Okay.
Whoa. Okay, so you get your masters.
Right. Then I taught at Brooklyn College. That was my first teaching job, was teaching ear training at Brooklyn College for a while, and I taught sort of music appreciation. Uh, Tried to get a permanent job. We don't have to get into the trials of academia on this podcast, but it was hard for me to get a permanent job without having a doctorate. It's just kind of the way that it works. Even if you're teaching at the very lowest levels, like a part-time adjunct job,
Hmm.
there are some expectations that you have the most advanced degree possible. So I decided to apply for PhD programs, and I got accepted to Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, and I lived there for 5 years while I completed a PhD. Again, music composition is the only thing that I've ever studied. So all my degrees are bachelor's in music composition, master's in music composition, doctorate in music composition. Spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That so a 5-year program. That's pretty crazy. I Are most doctorates that long?
Actually, that's pretty quick. The way that doctorate programs work is usually you do 2 years of coursework where you take classes,
Hmm.
and then from the time you finish your course, you're in dissertation writing mode, and it takes you however many years it takes you to write your dissertation is how long it takes you to graduate. So, unlike undergrad where you just need a certain number of credits and then they hand you your degree, uh, for a doctorate you need to have a big dissertation. And so the uh, the time that it takes is dependent on how long it takes you to do the work that you need to do. So when I was a student, there were definitely some people who were in their seventh or eighth or ninth years of being a PhD student who were still working on
Oh,
cranking out that
wow.
dissertation.
So what
So
was
five
your
years.
dissertation on?
Dissertation was two parts. One of them we actually just listened to. It was this piece, Cuts and Equivalents, was part of a longer set of pieces. It was a 15 movement piece that's about 80 minutes long. Cuts and Equivalents is just one section of the larger piece that was all about, that all used these field recordings that I made on a long car trip. I drove from Massachusetts to Wyoming on US Highway 20.
Oh, wow.
So for your listeners, that is not an interstate expressway. That is an interstate highway. So that means it stops at every stoplight in every town, all the way from, well, it goes from Boston to Seattle. I think it goes all the way to the West Coast, maybe Portland. I can't remember where the western terminus is, but it goes all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific. I didn't do the whole thing, but I did drive it from western Massachusetts, where I was living at the time, to Wyoming. And I stopped every maybe 40 or 50 miles, and I made a field recording at a gas station.
Oh,
So
yeah.
the entire way, I recorded gas stations. And it's kind of amazing to then to listen. I just wanted to get as many gas stations as I could while still, being able to move across the country.
Was there one memorable gas station?
There were, I mean, the one that's the most memorable was the one where security came and busted me. And a guy blocked me in from my parking spot so I couldn't back out. He demanded to know what I was doing.
Oh,
It was in Western New York. I don't remember the name of the town, but I do remember the feeling of like, field recording is a dangerous activity because, in our modern times where if you see something, say something. A beardy guy with some electronic equipment in a place that no one knows what they're doing
yeah.
is very suspicious. So yeah, I've been busted a few times. Sometimes people are cool about it. You just say, "Hey, I'm a grad student. I'm making field recordings," and they're cool. Sometimes people are real suspicious, and yeah, the Western New York people were not happy with my making some field recordings in there.
What was the what has been the worst experience you've had with something like that, of someone being concerned about your field recording?
The absolute worst was when I was making field recordings in Long Beach, California, at the port of Long Beach. So that's where the ships come in with their cargo. And that is a restricted area, as probably should be. I'm not a national security expert, but probably want to guard those ports for prevent malfeasance. But
Yeah.
it was just me with some field recording gear and some, I don't even remember. They were like Port Authority cops. I don't think that they were local law enforcement. I don't know what their thing was, but they came up and wanted to know what I was doing, demanded to see some ID, made some threats about how which laws I was breaking and how I might be punished for breaking those laws, and probably just wanted to scare the crap out of me, which worked. And then they followed me back to my car, and then they followed me out of town. So that to make sure that I was leaving their jurisdiction, they just chased me out of town.
Oh
I
my
did
God.
not actually get arrested, but it's not fun to explain to law enforcement. They're like, I'm working on a piece that's about the Port of Long Beach, and I'm a sonic ecologist. It's a suspicious kind of activity. So
Yeah.
it
Well,
has its own
you
job.
made it out alive though.
I did. I did make it out alive. That's a dubious honor. Yeah.
So,
So
cuts
yeah,
an
that was,
equivalent. It's part of a bigger piece. What's the name of the overall piece?
it's called Nowhere Landscape
Hmm.
for 8 musicians and field recordings. That was my sort of my dissertation piece. Although I've been informed that I can stop calling it my dissertation piece now that I've graduated. For a
Yeah.
while, it was like the giant thing that's hanging over. I mean, maybe you can relate to that as well. You have school projects that hang over your head, but when you're done with school, then those are just things you've done. They're not
Hmm.
things. They're no longer, the grade that you got on them no longer matters. The credits that you got for them no longer matter. That's just creative work that you have accomplished. So Nowhere Landscape is now just creative work that I've accomplished. It's no longer tied to dissertationing. But
Yeah.
it took me a few years to write that. That was a big piece.
Man.
Um,
Yeah, I can't even imagine trying to write such a long piece of music. Do you go into it in a way to sort of prepare for how long it's going to be? Did you know it was going to be that long?
Uh, I think that I was in a good place creatively and I just had a lot of ideas. And so the hardest part actually was figuring out how to organize them into something cohesive. It's like if you ever make a brainstorm list and you just keep coming up with idea after idea, the hardest thing is figuring out which of these are, figuring out the hierarchy. What's the most important idea here? What are the ones that aren't going to stick around? So, yeah, for me, it wasn't a problem figuring out how to take up that much time. I also had a professor uh, who writes a lot of really long duration pieces who said it's not about filling up the time, it's about opening up the time. So it's not like 80 minutes is a space that needs to be filled. 80 minutes is like a time when you can keep someone's attention for that long. So
Yeah.
it wasn't super hard for me to write something that is of that scale. It takes a long time, and depending on how detailed the music is that you write. I tend to write, as you've heard in these two examples you've played so far, pretty spacious music. So long duration is easier to write if you're writing really spacious music. If you're writing super complicated and detailed music that changes every second or half a second, then 80 minutes is a lot of half seconds. But 80 minutes is not a lot of 30-second chunks,
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's still a fair amount of 30-second chunks, but if you are thinking in more spacious terms, it's not that complicated. And I like that phrase of opening up the time instead of filling the time.
That's cool. I like it. Hey, we gotta go back in history still. We gotta. So after your doctorate, you're working. So you didn't secure a full-time teaching job, and you needed to find something else. Is that what was going on at around that time?
I mean, yeah, you're talking about the time when I left Brooklyn and I went to get a PhD.
Okay, so after the
Yeah.
after the PhD, where are
After
we
the,
now?
after the PhD, we are in 2016, and I started teaching at the University of New Haven.
Whoa.
This is my first real job outside after getting a PhD. It was what I'm still doing, and my job has changed a little bit since I've been there. But yeah, I've been teaching at New Haven since 2016.
That's awesome. Man, we made it.
Yeah,
We
so
made
now
it through history.
we're up to the present. Yeah, congrats to us.
Hey, let's play another piece.
Okay, I am gonna go find a charger for my laptop so that I don't disappear on you. But I can do that while you are playing another piece.
Okay, cool. So we are going to play some slant light volume,
Excellent.
a piece for two electric guitars, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct, and it's me playing the guitars.
Very
And
cool.
astute listeners might realize that what I am actually playing is an acoustic guitar that is run through a distortion pedal, and
Oh, I
not
was
technically
wondering
an
about
electric
that.
guitar. Not technically an electric guitar after all.
Wow,
You were
you
like,
fooled me.
you're like, this sounds like an acoustic guitar through a distortion plug-in. It's not even a pedal. It's just a distortion plug-in.
Oh man.
Uh,
Well, I like the sound of it. Here, let's play it.
all right, let's play it.
I love that. It's like heavy Michael Hedges. If I were to find an artist that reminded me of it.
Cool. That is someone whose music I should listen to more. Michael Hedges does a lot of tapping kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I don't know his music very much, but that's someone who I should maybe listen to more. Definitely my frame of reference for that is less uh, solo guitar-y and much more like the music of Steve Reich. I don't know if you're familiar with his music, but
Hmm.
very pattern-based, very repetitive. So this piece is just kind of almost like a math problem. There's just a system that's being worked out gradually.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned before, it's the same kind of thing as some of my previous pieces where there's repetition, but it's just subtly changing. There's some subtle differences to the repetition. So no part of that sounds identical to any other part, but it also doesn't sound that different from any other part. And I kind of like that conflict. That once you start paying attention on like a micro level, there's all kinds of changes going on. But if you just zoom out, you put that on, it sounds like one thing that is the same from beginning to end.
Hmm.
I like watching you headbang to it too. It would be fun to play that for an audience of people who are all bouncing to it in the same way.
Yeah. Well, there's a cool groove to it, so you should
Yeah,
definitely
it's
play
got
that out.
so far it has received zero live performances. It exists only in a recorded version that I made that we just listened to. It's actually pretty devilishly hard to play that live.
I can imagine. Yeah.
That certainly I'll confess that was not a one take. Well, I'm playing two guitars on that recording, so obviously not one take, but it was not a two take process of doing that.
Cool. Hey, my buddy Noah was listening, and he very much enjoyed it.
Hey, thanks, Noah.
Very cool.
For aspiring guitarists out there, my guitar playing technique there was playing with a chopstick.
Oh.
So the guitar is set flat on a horizontal surface, and I'm just pounding on those open strings with the chopstick. And the open strings are tuned to each guitar has a different tuning, so you hear kind of like chords changing depending on which open string I'm hitting.
Hmm. What
So
tuning did you do?
don't remember off the top of my head. Each
Right.
one of the two guitars has a different tuning, so that even when they're both playing at the same time, you kind of hear almost like little melodies that get passed between them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a non-standard tuning, and I don't have it off the top of my head. So yeah, what the interest that happens there is just from like, am I going to hit 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 strings with the chopstick is like laid flat, so you can hit all 6 strings at once, or you can do the bottom 5 or the top 5, the bottom 2 or whatever. So it's a kind of gradual process of moving the chopstick from all the strings down to just the top or just to the bottom.
Cool.
And that's what makes the change over time in that.
Very cool. And Noah says chopsticks are low key the best eaten utensil. Would you agree with that statement?
I find them to be a challenge, but that's just maybe because I have weak hand muscles. And I'm also not sure what makes it low key the best eating utensil. Either it's like absolutely the best, in which case you got to own that. I don't know. What does it mean for something to be low key the best?
The
Maybe
opposite
it's,
of high key.
yeah, I feel like if you're going to say chopsticks are the best, then they're high key the best eating utensil. For me, a person who did not grow up using chopsticks, I find them to be awkward. And I would much rather, I'm actually like, sometimes I'm the guy who I have to ask for a fork, please, because I'm just struggling
Oh,
too
you're
much.
that guy?
Yeah, no one wants to be that guy, but also no one wants to drop all their food in their lap.
Yeah.
So I might be that guy. But I found that, I found a musical use for them. So they're low key the best guitar playing technology. That's what I would say.
Cool. Oh, we're getting some insight into it.
I'm getting some chopsticks lessons here from Noah.
Yeah, he says once you learn, they are superior because they can grab everything a fork can grab, and they regulate your gluttony.
Well, that could be useful for me. I often need gluttony regulation in my life. Maybe is there a drinking version of chopsticks? Maybe if you drink only out of very tiny glasses, can you use chopsticks to pick up a shot glass? And then could regulate your drinking as well.
Hmm. These are good ideas. I think we gotta implement them in regular society. I'd say. The drinking version is a stir-in straw. Yeah. Oh, where'd you go? I think something happened here. Hey, let me distract everyone. Boop ba boop ba boop ba. Boop ba boop ba doop ba. We lost Eddie. Where'd you go, Eddie? Eddie, where'd you go? We lost Eddie. Eddie! Eddie, where are you? Eddie!
Again, am I back in the game?
Where'd you go?
I'm here now. Can you hear me? Did I miss everything?
Oh, now I hear you.
Yeah, now I'm back in the game. What happened in the meantime, though? There was some chopsticks.
I don't know.
Was there I missed a piano performance. Were you doing a musical chopsticks?
No. Well, I lost you, so I put on mysterious music and was like, where'd you go?
Well, that's one of the mysteries of podcasting, I guess.
Yeah.
So a lot of people like pre-record their podcasts and then post just the best parts.
Nah.
You have a brave strategy here of just whatever obnoxious thing happens, that's going in there.
Yeah, you got to go back, listen to the very first one. I didn't route the audio, so I thought I had my microphones working, but it was just my computer speaker or computer mic. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
And you did like a 90-minute podcast where everyone could just hear your computer?
Oh yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Do you know the video of Bill O'Reilly trying to read off of the teleprompter, and he says, "We'll do it live."
Yeah.
So yeah, that became a good catchphrase for me. It's just, we'll do it live, whatever it is. It's good for teaching too. I'm not really prepared for class. That's okay. We'll do it live.
Do it live. You were always prepared, I feel. Oh,
Well,
also, I gotta say,
you
you had the best PowerPoints. How did you get such pristine PowerPoint skills?
Step one, throw a PowerPoint application and use Keynote. That's the Mac version of PowerPoint. It's way sexier. It's way nicer to look at Keynote than the PowerPoint. I don't know. I have a particular aesthetic. Really hate a white screen with black text because that's hard to read. That's nice to read on a page of a book, but it's hard to read on a projector because that's a lot of light. So I definitely developed an all black slide with white text. I don't know. Why are we talking about my Keynote aesthetic? That's a weird transition for this podcast.
It's stuck with me. I don't know.
Because you took multiple classes with me, and I have the same PowerPoint aesthetic in every class.
Yes. Some teachers won't even full screen the PowerPoint. You can see the part of the desktop with like a million folders on it.
That's horrible. No, yeah. I like a very clean aesthetic. Very into, even though I realize that we're using YouTube right now, I probably can't say bad things about YouTube because they'll shut us down, right?
Nah,
someone's listening to us and ready to shut us down.
Okay, continue.
I like the content of YouTube, but I really don't like when someone shows you a browser window with YouTube open in it, because you can see all of this up next stuff that they have, and it like knows what things you've watched before. And so I don't know if you've had this experience with other teachers, but like I can't stand when someone pulls open a YouTube window and I can of course my eyes immediately go to, oh, what's the algorithm recommending for them? Yeah. And it's like, oh, it's a bunch of like how to skin a chicken video or whatever. I don't know. And like, what's this person doing in their private life? I'm very into keeping my private life away from the classroom. Mm-hmm. And so any videos that I showed, I just ripped those off of YouTube. Sorry, YouTube's going to take us down now because I said I ripped videos from them. But if you have the files, then no one has to look at all the bullshit that's on your screen. I don't know. It's just important to me to have a clean aesthetic.
Yeah, and that I'm guessing that translates to your music, to how you present your music online. Oh, here's something. Oh,
What is
I'd
it?
love to know about Insipidify.
Oh,
Insipidify. I don't know how to say it, but I'd love
I
to know
also
about
don't.
that.
I also don't know how to say that. That is a YouTube channel that is also called Score Follower.
Hmm.
You found Slant Light Volume on there.
Yeah.
So that is a website that composers can send their scores and recordings. And I'll just plug it, although I don't know how to spell it, so you'll have to spell it for your listeners.
Hmm.
Or they could probably search my name in Slant Light Volume and find my thing. And anyway, composers send scores and recording, and some geniuses go through and listen to the recordings and sync up the images of from the score with the recordings. So it's really helpful for when you want to listen to music and see what it looks like on the page at the same time. Score follower is another name for it. So it shows you what's happening in the musical score at any moment of the piece. And they have some pieces that are written in sort of standard musical notation, but they also have a lot of pieces that are written in deeply bizarre, unstandard notation. And it's kind of fun to listen to and watch, like, I hear that the clarinet is doing that, but what could it possibly look like on the page to get them to make that sound? And this Insipidify website or YouTube channel helps you see what that looks. So
So,
yeah, you can check that
yeah.
out.
Are they sort of like I'm trying to wrap my brain around it because it almost seems like a record label in a sense.
There's sort of a curator of
Curator.
yeah, I don't know if people hate that word. They're definitely not a record label in the sense that they're not selling anything. They're sort of compiling and organizing. They have regular calls for composers to send in their work, and then they pick the things they like and they post them up.
Right. Cool. 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 Hey, it's been an hour. I know you said you wanted to go about an hour, but we gotta end on a high note here.
Yeah, let's not end on me
Um.
plugging a website that I don't know some very much stuff about, or me talking about my PowerPoint aesthetic. Those are two downer things to end a podcast on.
All right.
What do you,
What do you see? What do you see the future of music to be? What's
oh
music
man,
in 50 years?
that's also a bummer thing to end a podcast on. I don't know. I teach at a school that has a music industry program, and I'm honestly unclear about what those students are preparing themselves for. What is it? I don't even really know what the music industry landscape is of now. So in 50
Hmm.
years, um, I don't know. I think that people are still going to be making music without getting paid for it. That's going to be a depressing landscape. I don't see it being a sustainable. I don't see musicians having sustainable careers in 50 years. But I
Hmm.
also don't see everyone giving up writing music because I think people make music not just for financial gain.
Hmm.
I don't know. You didn't ask me about the industry. You just asked me about the state of music.
Yeah,
Um,
the state of how about the state of composition? What's the next what's the next trend?
I have a friend who is deeply into post-humanism, the idea that we are all slowly becoming cyborgs, or maybe not slowly becoming cyborgs.
All right.
And he talks about how the future of music is we all get implants in our ears that let us hear frequencies that we currently are unable to hear. And then we can, like, composers will write music that is literally inaudible by our human now ears, but we can write for like impossible frequencies. Or you could make art that's in colors that don't exist and things like that, because you could implant some, I don't know, new rods and cones into your post-human eyeballs.
Well, that
What do you
sounds
think?
fun.
You didn't ask me about the future of music in like 10,000 years. You asked me in like 5 years. I don't
Hey,
know. I'm
it
not good at I'm
could
not good at
be.
predicting these things.
I'd love to go to concerts where like there's no actual sound, but it's going straight to our brains, and we're all just moshing to really nothing, but it's in
Wow, you
our
could
in
just
our brains.
it's like a silent disco. Do you know that concept? Everyone's wearing headphones and and broadcasting the same music, so everyone's listening to it, but there's no actual audible sound. It's like that, except it just goes directly into your brain.
Yeah,
All right.
that sounds fun.
Maybe
Maybe.
that's going to be my answer to that question from now on. What do you see the future of music? And I'm just going to say, just beam directly into your brain,
Yes.
by, bypassing the ears altogether, and we just go straight to the brain. That
Yeah.
feels like a solid end to this podcast.
Yes. Yes. Well, let me end the podcast. Let's end this thing. Thanks for coming. Eddie Davis was on the show. See ya, people of the world. Eddie Davis on the show.